We really encourage participation as we go through this study, so I kind of feel a little strange with the poll in the middle here. So if I move strangely, you know why. I'm just trying to see a little bit more of the group here today. But again, good morning, everybody. And again, thank you for taking time out of your day to come to this meeting. This really is a very important and comprehensive task that the library has taken on, and I can't tell you how strongly we feel about having your attendance at this meeting and having you participate in this process. It really is a very, very vital part of this process, is to have the employees within this organization provide us information about your jobs. So as Brianna said, thank you for attending today. We will be asking a little bit more of you after today's meeting. We will be asking you to complete a questionnaire that will be providing us information about the work that you do and some of the factors that apply to your jobs. So we will be asking you to participate a little bit more, but it really is a very vital part of the success of this study. This really is a very informal session today, so again, we do really encourage participation from this group. As Brianna says, my name is Ann Antonsen, and I am a director with Baker Tilly. And we provide not only this service, but a variety of human resources services for all sorts of public sector organizations across the country. So the purpose of today's meeting is just to introduce you to, who's going to be doing the study, so you can put a face to the name. Also to identify the objectives that the library has put out there for completing this study, the process that we will go through for this study, your participation in the process, and how we'll use that information. At the end of this presentation, I will also be giving you a live demonstration of a position analysis questionnaire that we will be asking employees in every position to complete. That will let us know about the work that you do. So, a little bit, about Baker Tilly. And I can tell you, if for some reason I falter and I say Springstead, I used to be a part of a company called Springstead, and we have recently merged with a company called Baker Tilly. And this happened within the last month, so we're all still trying to get used to the transition. So every once in a while we slip a little bit, because I've been saying Springstead for 14 years, and it's a little hard to just get out of that mindset. So, but we are Baker Tilly, which is a great thing. We now are part of a much larger organization with a lot more resources to assist us in providing these types of services to our clients. But we really work with public sector organizations to ensure that they are building communities and services and program areas that are well managed and fiscally sound. And that involves their facilities, their services, and the staff that provide those types of services. So it really is kind of a full scope of assistance that we provide to our clients. Most of the staff we have at Springstead in all areas that we provide service are senior professionals, including those that have worked within public sector organizations. So they've worked in human resources, they've worked in finance, they've worked in public education, they've worked in economic development, providing a wide variety of services. We are one of the leading classification and compensation service providers in the country. In just the last 4 or 5 years, we've done hundreds of these studies. We've done these studies for organizations that have as few as 3 employees. Yes, they need assistance too in determining the appropriate levels of wages and benefits for their staff. We've also done these for organizations with more than 3,000 employees, and we've done these from coast to coast. We are one of the top human resources management consulting firms in the country. This is just one of the pieces of services that we provide. We also provide a broad scope of other human resources related services as well. So your project team, myself, I will be the project director through all phases of the study. So I started off on site yesterday, so all day yesterday and all day today. Meeting with various levels of staff across the organization. I will also be involved in collecting and reviewing information as we start to collect it throughout the different phases of the study. I will be the one that will be preparing the recommendations for the library upon completion of this study, and I will be the one that will be delivering the final report. So I'm not just a face that shows up on day one and then walk away from the project. I am involved throughout all the different phases of the study. I have been doing this type of work for more than 25 years. I've been with my current organization, well, one of them for 14 and one for a month. But I have a lot of experience doing this type of work. I've worked for a lot of different types of libraries, both regional libraries, county libraries. I've worked for systems that have been a component of a larger organization, so they've been just a department within a county or a city, and those that have been standalone organizations. So I'm very familiar with the operations of library systems, although every one is unique. So one of the things that we're here to find out, again, is how this system works. Assisting me with this project will be Jama McClung. She is a consultant and project analyst with Springstead. She's worked with me on many projects. She's familiar with how library systems work as well. She's the one that's behind the scenes. So she's making sure that everything is collected, everything is running behind the scenes. So she'll be in charge of making sure that we have PAQs completed for every position within the library system. She has responsibility for putting together our market survey document, for making sure we're getting those responses. So, ensuring we have all the data that we need to make the recommendations at the end of the study. So she's a very vital part of this team, and she's just great to work with in the background. You don't see her face, but we couldn't do this without her. So a little bit about our philosophy when we conduct a classification and compensation study. Really, employee involvement is a vital part of this process. We want to make sure that you are confident in the process so that you can be confident in the end results. And that really is very important to us. That's why in every project that we do, we make sure that there's employee involvement at all levels within the organization. And usually that there's more than one contact made with different staff as well. So when we look at compensation, so you'll hear us talk a lot about compensation as a part of this. So when we look at it, we'll be looking at it from, kind of two different viewpoints. One of those is going to be looking externally. And so that involves doing a comprehensive wage and benefit study to compare your total compensation package with similar organizations. So that's what we talk about when we say externally, is what are similar organizations doing within their organizations. The second piece is going to be looking internally. So our goal is not only to be, competitive in the established market, but also to ensure that there's internal equity within the organization. So the goal of that is to ensure that positions that are performing similar levels of duties, have similar levels of job responsibilities, similar levels of job requirements as far as education, experience, any special requirements, that those positions are compensated at a level that's comparable to one another within the organization. So those are some of the goals that we establish for development of recommendations as a part of this. And then we also feel that the work that we do needs to be a defensible process. So when we deliver final results, if somebody asks a question as to, well, how come this position is at grade 12 and my position is at grade 10, we can defend that and validate that information. So the job evaluation system that I'll talk about a little bit later gives us the ability to really validate and appropriately evaluate every position within the organization based on quantifiable, measurable items. And again, I'll cover that a little bit later as well. Then we also believe that any recommendations that we make for the classification and compensation system, it needs to be understandable to all the stakeholders. it needs to be usable by the organization so that you can maintain this moving forward. Because the goal of any valid classification and compensation system is not just to establish something that an organization can use in your organization for 2020 or 2021. It's something that needs to be maintainable. It needs to be something that's sustainable moving forward, and that can change and grow with an organization. So that's the goal of this, is to develop a long-term program and strategy for the library system. And then again, we need to have both the process and the outcomes be credible. That's very important to us as well. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to jump in. So the objectives that have been identified by the library for doing this. As Brianna said, this organization has never, ever done a comprehensive classification and compensation study. So, this is a whole new ballgame for the organization and everybody that's involved. Anybody in this room ever been through a classification and compensation study? We've got one. So you're the expert now. Everybody's going to come to you for questions. Our goal is to make this as painless and understandable and transparent for all staff. So that's a big goal, and that was a big objective of the organization, because this is all new for you. So the second part of that is, because of that, they wanted to make sure that there were opportunities for input from all staff and all levels of employees within the organization, from the director on down to the library pages, so that everybody's involved in all branches. You've got a lot of branches across the organization, and they're very spread out, but that people from every branch could participate in this study. So that was very important. And then the question that always is, on the top of every classification and compensation system is where do salaries and benefits currently compare to the market? So what is that current relationship? Are they competitive, or are there areas where you're not? Are benefits competitive? So we'll be doing a very comprehensive data collection on that information to determine, okay, where do you currently stand relative to the market? And then the second piece of that, as I said earlier, that's the external piece that I spoke of earlier. The second piece of that is ensuring that there's internal equity. So we'll be evaluating the relationships of positions within the organization based on current job responsibilities and current job requirements. The library currently has descriptions for every position on file. Some of them are probably fairly accurate. Some, there may have been changes. So that's why we're going to be asking employees at every position and their supervisors to provide us information in a position analysis questionnaire, or PAQ, that gives us accurate information about the job that you are doing for the library. And you are the ones that are best tasked with providing us information. You're the ones that are doing the job day to day. You're the ones that are in the branches. You're the ones that are providing different types of services, both at the forefront and dealing with your patrons, and those that are ensuring that everything runs behind the scenes. So it's very important to this process that we get your input and making sure that those are accurate and up to date. If those are not accurate, then when we do our market survey comparison, we're not going to get valid information for comparable positions, and we won't have good internal equity as well. So then we'll look at, okay, once we collect all that information, then we'll compare it to what your current structure looks like, and analyzing that information, and say, okay, do we need to throw out what you currently have? Do we need to tweak what you currently have, or develop a whole new system? Again, we do not know what those recommendations are going to look like until we've collected and analyzed and reviewed all of the volumes of information that are collected as a part of these types of studies. And then, yes?
I was just curious about what is the length of time that this usually takes?
Usually about 6 months. less if we get all of the PAQs done early. As Brianna's over here going, yes. And if, the part of this process that usually slows everything down is getting those that are selected to be our market survey recipients. If they take their time in providing us information, we'll slow it down. There's a lot of things that can happen that can slow the process down or speed the process up. So, and when we start making recommendations, kind of the final pieces of this will be looking at, okay, what do we need to do for revision or development of compensation system, of the strategy and the policies for the organization. Because again, as I said earlier, the goal is to have this sustainable and maintainable within the organization. So what policies do we need to develop to ensure that that happens? And then once we develop recommendations, we'll also be looking at, okay, based on any changes that are recommendation in the compensation or benefit structure, how do we go about implementing those changes? Can we do it in, one initial change, or do we need to phase in changes over a period of time? And again, those are questions that we cannot answer at this time. Until we collect and analyze all the data, we have a lot of unanswered questions as a part of these studies. So, right now we are at step 1 of the process, and that is project initiation, and then we start on to data collection as well. So, as part of project initiation, I met yesterday morning with the executive team to discuss background, any issues or concerns that they wanted to see addressed throughout the study, answer any questions that they had about process and those types of things. Had a meeting again yesterday with the library's project team because they will have responsibility for managing this process internally, making sure that employees are completing their position analysis questionnaires, that supervisors are then following up and completing their portions of the questionnaires, and we're getting all of the data that we need for conducting the study. And we will probably call upon them if our survey recipients are not responding. We'll ask them to beg as well as us begging for them to respond to surveys. So, they're a very valuable internal team that will assist in this process. Then this morning I met with all the department heads to discuss their responsibility for providing information up front and also throughout the different phases of the study. And an opportunity for them to ask any questions that they had as well. We're also asking department heads to complete a questionnaire that will provide us information about their individual department or area of service. So how is their area structured? So the positions, the number of staff that they have, an overview of the level and types of services that they are providing, any special requirements within their department, any unique positions or services that they have within their department, information on any issues or concerns with recruiting new employees or retaining employees in any position, and their feedback on who should be included as a part of our market survey. So they'll be providing us a lot of information on their individual area. That's very important to us when we conduct the study because when we come into an organization, just because we've done work for a different library system or a city or a county, that doesn't mean that they are all exactly the same. So we want to become very familiar with your operations, your structure, your issues and concerns. That helps us in developing our market survey, it helps us in reviewing positions for internal comparisons, and it helps us in preparing those final recommendations for the organization. Then we have 3 of these employee meetings. This is the second of 3. Yesterday, Brianna and I went up to Omak. Very nice afternoon for a nice drive. It was very pretty. And we had a great turnout for the meeting, and we had great questions and participation from the employees yesterday. Then we have this one this morning, and then we're going to Moses Lake this afternoon. So I'm going to visit at least a few of the locations here, which I'm looking forward to. So the goal of that was to provide an opportunity for as many staff as possible to attend a live session for this, but as you can see from all my mics, this is also being recorded. So any of your coworkers that were unable to attend any of these meetings, this presentation will be available and the PowerPoint presentation will be available. So they'll be able to see the video recording and also see this presentation as well. We already talked a little bit about project schedule. So the goal is we'd like to come in sooner than 6 months, but as you know, it's not all dependent on us or internal staff. We have a lot of other people that we are depending on for providing us information. So step 2 is where we move into data collection from employees. We've already gotten a lot of information from Human Resources. We've gotten a lot of contact information for employees, so we can send you our online position analysis questionnaire. We've got all of your current descriptions. We have all of your current classification and compensation documents. So we have a lot of background information, but now we need the information to move forward with this. And so this is where you, as employees of the organization, come into play. So we will be asking employees in every position to complete a position analysis questionnaire, or PAQ. This is designed to be completed online. So anywhere you have internet access, you can log on to the PAQ that is designed specifically for you as an individual and your position. So you can use a smartphone, although sometimes that's a little small. You can use a tablet, you can use a laptop, you can use a PC at your workstation. So wherever you can get internet access, you can access that online PAQ. So we'll be asking you to complete the PAQ, and I'll give you a live demonstration of that again at the end of this presentation. Once you complete and submit your PAQ, it will then go to your designated supervisor. And your supervisor can provide information, provide additional comments. But as you can see when I show you that live demo, supervisors cannot change any of the information that employees in a position provide. They can review, they can provide comment, such as, the employee forgot about an essential function that they're required to perform, or forgot about a special requirement, or any other information they feel is relevant. And then when we receive those completed PAQs, we can view the employees' responses and then the supervisor's responses. So they're unedited. So we get to see all of that. So that's a comfort level for employees going, they're going to see exactly what I wrote. And then once supervisors complete those, supervisors will not be hitting submit right away. Brianna will be sending out instructions to all those supervisors as to who will be next in the review process. In this online system, we can only designate an employee and one supervisor for the chain. And so supervisors will then be sharing their login information with whoever is designated from Brianna for that review process. So that will be coming out after these meetings for that contact. So when you go to complete the PAQ, your current descriptions will be available for you, and please use those as you're going through and completing the position analysis questionnaire. There's going to be a lot of relevant information in those current descriptions for you to use in completing the PAQ. And then it's also useful for you to see just kind of what types of essential functions are listed, what are the requirements that are listed, and it assists you in formulating any ideas of other things that might not be included in those current descriptions that need to be included in the new ones. So it's a very good starting point for you. It's a good tool for you to use when you go through completing the PAQ. So rather than sitting there and trying to think of, because we're asking you to describe the work that you do. Well, when you sit there, you think about, how am I supposed to put down on paper everything that I do in my job? That will kind of assist you in that thought process. The completion of the PAQs, this gives us the information that we need for updating or developing descriptions for every position. It gives us the information we need to develop summaries of positions to put in our comprehensive wage and benefit survey, so we make sure we're getting accurate information from those organizations selected to participate in that survey. And it gives us the information we need to do that internal evaluation of all positions as well. So it's a very important document. So when you go through this process, please take the time to really think about it, do your homework before you go through it, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment, and take the time to make sure you're providing thorough, accurate information about your job. Because if we don't get good information at this part of the study, then the final recommendations are not going to be valid. So this is your opportunity to have input into this process. So it's kind of, why is this not moving? Oh, you haven't seen any of the slides that I've been doing. Why didn't somebody say something? It's changing on my screen. Oh, there we go. Okay, sorry about that, folks. I don't have eyes in the back of my head.
Sorry, I thought that you were doing it differently than yesterday.
No,
So
okay,
that would be my fault.
that's all right. So we got to figure it out. So this is what you didn't see, but hey, this is available for all of you. I'm watching it change on my screen. So this is what you didn't see. So, okay. Sorry about that. Okay, so this is what the screen will look like when you log into the account. But again, I'll give you a live demo of this in just a little bit. But this is what the first screen on the position analysis questionnaire will look like. And again, use your current job description to complete job duties and then note any necessary changes. But again, we'll go into more detail on that later. I'll make sure it changed. Okay. All right, so when it gets time to do the PAQ for your position, if you do some homework ahead of time, and that's going through your current job description and kind of reviewing what it outlines for essential job duties, and then thinking about anything that's new or thinking about things on there that are no longer relevant to your position, if you do some prep work, completion of that PAQ should only take about an hour. And I have had to go through this process, so I have the experience in going through and completing a PAQ because we did this internally at our company about a year ago to make sure that all of ours were updated because we had gone through some organizational changes as well. So you have unlimited login opportunities when you're completing the position analysis questionnaire. So you can go in and out of it, 50 times if you so choose. I don't think any of you probably want to spend that much time on it, but you can if you choose, especially if you get a lot of interruptions. Because if all of a sudden it's quiet and you have an opportunity to log in and you work on it, and then you get somebody that wants to come up and ask a question, you can save and you can log back in at any time to do that. And it will save your changes as you work through it, but there's also the opportunity for you to hit save just to make sure that that's working.
One thing I would like to add, this is a really, as we said, a really important piece of the salary study, if not the most important piece. And so if it would be helpful for you to get some coverage so that you can do this uninterruptedly, I think that is absolutely authorized, so by all means. Yes. So for library assistants, we will be getting a representative sampling because, that's a great question, I'm glad you brought it up. For library assistants and for pages, because those jobs are, for the pages, the jobs are very, very similar. And for the library assistants, we have, I think it's about 100 of them, or possibly more. So we don't want the firm to have to go through 100 questionnaires, but we are going to get a representative sampling of the different types of subs we have. So we have some that are really doing circulation duties, and then we have some that are helping with programming and manning an entire library while the librarian is gone. So those are a little bit different, so we'll get a representative sampling. Any other questions?
Yeah, and I'll cover that a little bit more when we get actually into the PAQ. So employees, you will have 10 working days to complete the PAQ. So your PAQs are due to your supervisor by Friday, May 17th, and then supervisors will have until Friday, May 31st to do their review, and then they will then provide access to the next step in the review process, which again will be shared with all supervisors after we complete this project initiation this week. If you can do it sooner rather than later, of course that moves the process along a little bit faster, but we wanted to make sure that we allowed employees ample opportunity to participate in this process. And again, you could do this on your work time, but you can also do it if you're off work and you just happen to be sitting at home one night and go, I think I want to go look at my PAQ. If you have nothing else to do. But that's kind of the time frame. A lot of organizations we just give 5 days to, but because of the varying work shifts and the different branches and the encouragement of collaboration, if possible, we wanted to allow a little bit additional time for staff. So once we get those completed PAQs back by all of the involved parties in the review process, we will review every PAQ that we get back for positions. As Brianna said, we really don't need 100 PAQs for a library assistant, but if we got 100, we would look at them. It just slows us down because we want to make sure that nothing is missed, which is why we encourage that collaboration. So we'll do a very thorough review and analysis of those, and then we will start to make recommendations for changes in current descriptions. We may make recommendations for development of some new descriptions and maybe changes in job titles as well. So we'll be doing a very comprehensive review of all aspects of those descriptions, from job titles down to every component that's included in those. We also will review requirements under the Americans with Disabilities Act to make sure that the physical requirements and the working conditions are identified for every position. We'll also be reviewing positions designation under the Federal Fair Labor Standards Act. So do positions qualify as exempt or non-exempt from the overtime requirement? So we'll be doing that level of analysis as well. We will send preliminary descriptions back for review and comment, and then make any necessary changes. Typically, the complete job descriptions come back later in the process because that is very time consuming, and if we wait to complete all of the descriptions before we move on to the other phases, it would really delay the other phases of the project. So when we get your PAQs back, we initially will develop project job summaries. So a summary of the position responsibilities, a summary of the job requirements. Those will be reviewed internally, and then we'll use those when we prepare our market survey document, because the goal, because that takes so long, is to get that out as soon as possible. And then we follow up with putting together the content of the job description. So if you don't see a copy of your job description for several months, it's not because we're not working on them. It's just that we have priorities to get certain things started so that we can complete the process on time. So, speaking of the market survey, that will be the next phase in this process, will be to get that market survey sent out. We do a very comprehensive wage and benefit survey to request a lot of information from these other organizations, and that's why it sometimes takes them a longer period of time to complete those questionnaires, because we really are asking for them to devote some time to completing that questionnaire. So our questionnaire has several different sections. The first section in our questionnaire is going to be requesting information about the pay practices and policies in the organizations that are selected to participate in the survey. So do they have an established and adopted pay plan or not? If they do they just have a single pay plan that covers all levels and types of employees, or do they have more than one pay plan? Then how are those plans structured? So do they have a traditional step system? If so, how many steps do they have in their system? What's the percentage between those steps? And what's the frequency with which employees move through those steps? Is it on an annual basis? Is it I've seen some where it might be annual and then it moves to 18 months. Between step 1 and step 2 might be 6 months for probationary periods, but we want to find out how do they maintain and utilize that system. Then if they don't have a step system, do they have an open range system where they have a starting pay, they have a maximum pay, but nothing really in between? And if so, how are employees progressing through that pay range? Is it based on time? Is it based on cost of living? Is it based on performance? Or is it a combination of factors? Or is it some other structure that they have? You know, sometimes they're blended, so there's steps and then open range and other types of things. But we want to find out, okay, what is going on in the established marketplace? How are they implementing and maintaining and utilizing their compensation programs? Then we ask questions on any additional types of compensation which may be provided. So are they providing longevity pay? That's not very common, but you do see it in some organizations. Are they providing any sort of performance or merit pay? Are there any other types of compensation, educational incentives or anything else that they're providing? Then for each position that's included in the market survey, again, we'll include a summary of the position as it exists here because we want to ensure that we're getting valid comparisons. Job titles don't tell the whole story, so we don't just send out a survey that just includes job title of library assistant or library clerk or librarian 1. We want to make sure that we're defining what it does here, and then they can do that comparison. So what is the position, then what's the starting pay in each of the participating organizations, what's the top wage, what's the current actual pay for an incumbent, and how many years has that incumbent been there. That kind of tells us how they're using their pay plan. So if somebody is very new in their position, but they're being paid at the top of their range, that indicates to us that they haven't updated their compensation plan for a while. And we can take that into consideration as we analyze that data. Also on the flip side, if somebody has been there for 12 years and they're near the bottom, that also gives us additional questions that we may need to ask. They may have recently adopted a new pay plan, but that's one of the questions that we ask as well. When is the last time you conducted a compensation study? Is it within the last couple of years? If so, we know it's fairly up to date. Is it never, such as this organization? Or is their current compensation system 15 or 20 years old? So that's good information for us to use as we start to analyze the data. And then we ask questions as to how many hours per week that position works. It may be a 40-hour week employee, it might be a temporary employee, or it might be a part-time employee. So that's helpful as well. Then is it exempt or non-exempt from overtime? Because that can affect decisions that organizations make on the level of compensation. And then we also provide the opportunity for comments. So they may have a similar position, but it might have a different job title, or it might have different levels of responsibilities or job requirements. So say In this organization, a position requires a 2-year degree. And in one of the other organizations, it maybe requires a high school diploma. Well, we want to be able to analyze that data and say, okay, our position, has a higher level of job requirements. So we need to take that into account when we're reviewing the data. And then a very comprehensive fringe benefit questionnaire as well. And all of this will be customized specifically for this organization as far as what are the areas that are of need of information for this organization. Then we'll be looking at benchmark organizations. We have received some information which I haven't had a chance to look at yet. We're still collecting. But looking at benchmark organizations, we know that this one is very unique just because of the area that you serve, the number of branches that you have, the size of some of those branches. You never find, when you're doing a market survey, you're never going to find another organization that is exactly like the one that you're doing the survey for. So the goal is to find, enough variety of organizations that where you can get a good feel for every type and level of position. So we'll select a variety of organizations to participate in the survey. And typically the factors that we look at is, similar size of service area. We look at organizational structure, so who's providing the same level and types of services that you are, again, knowing that every system is a little bit unique. We look at geographic location. We take demographics into account. We look at competition for employees. So there's a lot of different factors that typically go into the selection of that group. And then looking at benchmark positions. So we want to make sure that the positions that we include in the survey are positions that are likely to be similar across other organizations. We want to make sure that we have the full scope of positions and that every kind of department and area of responsibility is represented in that survey. So while we're waiting for the survey responses, again, which can sometimes take a period of time, then we'll start looking at how positions compare to one another within the organization. And what we use to do that is called job evaluation. And that's looking at positions and position responsibilities, not individuals or any performance-related items. So it's looking at job requirements. So this is something that is common practice in public and private sector organizations worldwide. And it's the tool that organizations use to make sure that positions are lined up appropriately internally within their compensation plan. So it's something that you can use for developing a system, but that's also what you use to maintain the system. So if a position changes over time or there's a new position that's developed, the organization has the ability through training of its HR staff to evaluate those new or revised positions and say, okay, based on this evaluation, this is where that position fits within the compensation plan. This is also very useful because sometimes we don't get valid market survey information for certain positions. So how do we determine then where they fit in the pay plan? That's job evaluation. So this is a very comprehensive system that we're using. This is called the SAFE system, which is short for Systematic Analysis and Factor Evaluation System. It's a long name. I didn't develop the name. But it's very comprehensive. I've used a lot of job evaluation systems over the years, and some of them just look at a very narrow scope of position responsibilities, so it doesn't really give you a very valid evaluation. This system is very broad, so it gives us 9 different job factors that we look at across positions. So we get a very thorough and accurate evaluation of every position. So when we get to looking at the PAQ that I'll be demonstrating shortly, you will see that a lot of these factors tie directly to the questions that are in that PAQ. So again, it's very important for you to be thorough and accurate in completion of that PAQ. So the 9 job factors are training and ability, which includes both formal education as well as any specialized training or job requirements. or any certifications or licenses that are required of your position, which take training, maybe some testing, but don't result in a degree. It looks at the prior work experience that's required of the position. And again, this is all based on position requirements, not individual employee qualifications. Especially in a position, as Brianna gave the example earlier, if we have 100 library assistants, I bet every single one of you has a different background and different training and different work experiences. So we need to look at, okay, if the organization was to hire somebody into this position, what would they be looking at for job requirements for that position? And then looking at the level of work, and that's looking at of the type of work that's being done. Is it entry level all the way up to a management level of position? Human relation skills. So what's your responsibility of working with or through others, both within and outside of the organization? Physical demands, pretty straightforward. Working conditions, which you'll see in the questionnaire, we've broken it out into 2 different categories. Independence of action, so how independently are you either required or allowed to function in your position? For some of you in the branch offices, I'm sure that sometimes there are very few of you on duty at any one time. So some of you may be working more independently just because of where you're assigned and working. Impact of end results, I'll go over that a little bit more in the questionnaire, and then supervisory responsibilities. So do you supervise or oversee other staff, what positions, how many employees, etc. The things that are not considered in job evaluation, your current rate of pay doesn't come into play, the market rate of pay doesn't come into play, job performance doesn't come into play, where positions were aligned previously doesn't come into play. It's looking at current responsibilities and requirements. So, once we collect and analyze our market survey data, we've done the job evaluation, then we'll be looking at doing a total compensation package plan. And when we look at total compensation, we need to ensure that we're taking wages and benefits into consideration as we develop those recommendations. Because in all the years I've been doing this, we see some organizations, they say, okay, we want to be at average for pay and we want to be at average for benefits. But I've seen others where they say, well, we want to be a little bit higher than average in our level of compensation that we're providing. And so you look at that and you say, okay, but some of them may say because we're paying higher, we may not provide the same level of benefits. So they might provide a lower level of benefits and vice versa. I've seen this come both ways. I just did a study for a city last summer, and they were well below market when we looked at just their wages. And so if we had just developed a compensation plan looking just at wages themselves, we would have made some pretty significant adjustments. However, the city council in this city made a determination that they really wanted to provide a high level of benefits to their staff. So they were paying 100% not only of employee health insurance, but they were paying 100% of family coverage as well, which is huge. And not only were they paying for the health insurance coverage, they were also paying for the deductibles, and they were making putting money in their HSAs as well. And so they said, okay, because of this, we are satisfied. We realize that we're very low relative to market, so we are willing to make this adjustment, but when we look at our total compensation package, it needs to be kind of equal to the market when we look across the board. And so that's the reason we need to look at both pieces of that. So we'll develop that structure after we take into consideration all of the wages, wage equivalents, and benefits. We'll then assign positions within those proposed recommendations and then start looking at individual employees. So are any changes necessary based on the recommendations for individual employees, and then what impact does that have on the organization? And when we look at implementation, sometimes we can make those changes, at one time, but in many cases we need to kind of phase in some of those adjustments over time to stay within the financial resources of the organization, and those changes need to be sustainable by the library as well. So when we look at implementation, it takes into consideration both the needs of the employees and the budgetary requirements of the library, not only in 2020, but also moving forward as well. We will make recommendations for revision or development of policies for ongoing administration. We will provide staff training to the human resources staff for maintenance not only of the compensation plan, but for use of the SAFE job evaluation system. But we're always available to provide any level of support upon completion of the study that is needed within the organization. So the last step of this will be developing and presenting our final report, which will include the methodology we used for conducting the study. It will have our findings and recommendations, the results of the job evaluation, all of the classification descriptions. It will have the compensation system and total compensation package analysis included in that. It will have the proposed compensation package as well as any recommendations for implementation. So that's what we'll be doing. Here's my contact information. If anybody feels the need to follow up and ask a question, you can shoot me an email, you can make a phone call. And before I jump out of this presentation and move to the online PAQ, I'm going to open this up for questions that you might have thus far.
When you look at benchmark organizations, if you answered this stimulus, but are you looking at libraries for us, or are you looking at other public organizations as well?
Well, we'll be looking at libraries, and Brianna, you may want to jump in on this as well. We'll be looking at libraries because that's who has primarily librarians and library assistants and those types of positions. However, there may be some private sector organizations that we need to pull in for looking at other types of positions that might fall outside of just being available in a library.
That's exactly correct. We do have, our organization is a little unique, so it's very large and it's rural. So there are certain library systems that it doesn't make sense to compare to, like, for example, Seattle Public. We're not going to get good numbers. But particularly as we've in general looked at comparable organizations, Spokane Public Library is pretty close, and Yakima pretty close. We're also including, I believe, Kitsap, because it has a bookmobile, and that kind of consideration, so that we can and Luke's going to let me know if there are any more already asked him, so we can find those positions that are a little more rare and make sure they're covered.
I was just curious, because there's lots of positions in the organization, like say HR or IT or graphic design, that are not just unique to libraries. And I was wondering if you were looking at other organizations outside of libraries.
We are. And another example is looking at the ESD. They definitely would compete for STEM and other positions with them. So we will be looking at a variety of organizations. Great question.
Any other questions before we jump into the PAQ? Okay, if anything comes up and you think about it, just feel free to jump on in. Okay, so I know it's kind of hard to see a little bit up here, but on Friday, employees will all be getting an email, kind of reminding you that the organization has recently undertaken the task of doing a classification and compensation study and inviting you to participate. It will come to you as an individual employee, and it will have your current job title within that document. If for some reason the job title is not accurate, please contact Human Resources, and they can make the changes within the system to make sure that it's accurate. That's the only part of the position analysis questionnaire that will have anything related to your job, is just your name and your job title. So in here, there will be a link so that you can access the online PAQ, and then each individual employee has a unique user ID and a unique password. So it's specifically for you as an individual. Nobody else will have access to your PAQ unless you provide that to them and give them your login information. Also included in your email will be both 2 contacts, and this is also included in the PAQ, which I'll show you in a moment. One is for contact regarding questions about the content of the PAQ, and one is for technical issues. So you can go ahead and just click the login, and it will bring you to the initial screen. And then I usually suggest just copy and paste your user ID and your password. And as I said earlier, you can log in and log out as many times as necessary to complete the PAQ. Oh, I can't see it on my screen. Good, thank you. All right, so it will bring you to the initial screen. Again, we'll have your name and your job title on here. As we discussed earlier, for those of you who are in a position where there's more than one employee performing the same work with the same job requirements, we're encouraging you to collaborate, and collaborate in a manner that's easiest for your group. So depending on how many employees are involved, you could all sit down together, although, you know, sometimes with varying shifts that can be difficult. Or select kind of a core group that you feel would best represent the position. And typically, if you're going to select people, we suggest selecting individuals that have a variety of experiences. So somebody that's maybe been in the position for a long time, somebody who's kind of been there for mid-range, and somebody that's maybe newer in the position, because the duties that you're performing can vary depending on your tenure in the position. So typically newer employees are doing, you know, kind of the more entry level of that job as they learn the position, and then as you gain more experience, your duties can vary. So to make sure that you're encompassing all of the responsibilities and essential functions of the position, get a variety of levels of experience involved in that. Then that core group can, and you'll see you can either save and share, or you can print out a copy of the PAQ so other members of your classification can review the information that you've included in this and can provide any feedback. So that's how we suggest. For those of you who are in same position but in different branches, we suggest doing this per position within branches, because depending on the size of the branch, you may be doing different duties depending on the position that you're in. So we are expecting, you know, many library assistants. We're expecting many librarians, because we want to make sure that we kind of have the full scope of wherever anybody's assigned, so we can really do that very thorough analysis. So up on the top here, here on your help button, that didn't work very well. Yet it doesn't show up very well on this little screen, but this will give you the contact information for, again, technical or content assistance. Then you have a menu that will allow you to move within the questionnaire itself. So you've got begin, and you've got each of the different tabs. So if you want to jump to a different tab, you could just click on that button and move within the questionnaire, and then you can go back to the beginning. So it allows you to kind of review the different sections if you want to review those before you get started, or once you've completed one section and you say, well, I want to see what I said back in this question, you can skip back to that one as well. So this PAQ has already been pre-populated so that we're not going through and completing it while you're sitting here. So this particular questionnaire is for a records clerk. So the first question that you have is looking at how many hours you're scheduled to work in a week. So what is your regular work schedule? If your kind of schedule varies, put on there the average number of hours that you would work in a week, and then down in this 1A, comment. And just say, I average 20 hours per week. However, one week I might work 25, and the next week I might work 15. So let us know that your work schedule does vary. Or for those that are the substitutes, let us know that your schedule varies greatly. And then that would be the other. You wouldn't put in any number of hours because it would just be, dependent on need, and that's what you would put in there as well. So here we've clicked other because the position is 32 hours is what the explanation is for this employee. All right, question 2. This is the question where you need to do a little bit of homework. I know you thought you were done with school, but we're asking you to do a little bit of homework. It will make completion of this section much easier. And so this is where your current description can be very helpful in completing this section of the questionnaire, because this is where we ask you to describe the essential functions of your position. So you can look at your current description and determine, okay, these are the functions that are still a part of this position and they're part of the work that I do. And depending on whether that current description is in a Word document or some other format, you may be able to just copy and paste into this document, or you can just type it in on this document, whatever works easiest for you. Then as you're reviewing those essential functions, then you can say, okay, this is no longer a responsibility, so you would not incorporate that into this document. And then start to think about anything that's new, because positions do change over time. Positions that might have the same job title are doing different things depending on the branch that you are currently assigned to. So we really want to know specifically in your job that you're doing, what are the duties that you're performing. So when you do this and you start to kind of review your description and start to think about the work that you do, you have to think about, okay, not only what am I doing today and what did I do yesterday and what will I be doing tomorrow, but you kind of have to think about, okay, throughout the work year, what are some of my responsibilities? For some jobs, it's pretty consistent, the work that you do throughout the work year. But there are some positions where you may have certain functions that you might perform on a pretty rare basis. So there might be something that you do once or twice a year, but it might be a very important component of your job. So sometimes doing annual reports and those types of things. You only do it once a year, but it's very time consuming to put together the data. And it's probably something that if you did it 6 months ago, you've probably put way in the back of your mind because it's kind of a painful process to do it. And so you don't really think about it today. You'll worry about it, and again in another, 4 months when you need to. So we usually suggest start with, kind of short time frames. So, what are the types of things that really are your responsibility to do on a day-to-day basis? And then start extending out that time frame. So move to, weekly, monthly, quarterly, etc. Also think about different times of the year. Are there programs that you run in summer versus what you run in the winter? So when kids are out of school in the summer, are you doing different programs than what you do in the winter when kids are typically in school? So think about those types of things as you're going through this. Each of these fields does expand. So when you're doing this, each essential function is typically, most are 1 to 2 sentences. Occasionally you might have an essential function that goes to 3 sentences, but that's pretty unusual. Most are 1 to 2. You can group similar items together. So if you have responsibility for preparing different types of financial reports, if they're similar in nature, that can be a single job function. You don't need to list those out separately. If you're running similar types of programming, that can be grouped together as well. If you have responsibility for maintaining certain types of equipment, Things that are similar in nature, again, grouped together. So 1 to 3 sentences. Typically, most descriptions have on the low side probably 5 essential functions. On the high side, probably somewhere around 15. So that's your guideline for doing this. But don't think if you only come up with 5 essential functions that you have to put in more. The number of job duties that you perform has nothing to do with how you compare out in the marketplace or how you compare for internal equity. It's job content, not quantity of job functions. So don't think that you have to think about putting more job functions in here. As you can see in this one that we have mocked up, we've got 6 essential functions because that's the importance of this job. When you're doing this, it's not meant to be a detailed listing of every task that you perform. So it's meant to be kind of a summarization of a job duty, but not the tasks that come along with doing that job duty. So if one of your responsibilities is for, making sure that, the building is open, we don't need to know that you walk up to the front door and you unlock the front door, and that you turn around and you flip on the light switch and then you walk to the next room. We would need to know responsible for ensuring that the building is open by unlocking doors, turning on lights, and those types of things, not the detailed steps that come along in between that. So again, that goal is 5 to 15. They should be summaries of the work that you do, starting with the verbs. So operates, prepares, supervises, responds to inquiries. So those types of things. Examples of what not to do. And this happened a lot more. The first example happened a lot more when we used to have these in paper form and people could provide attachments as well. But we've had many, many, many instances over the years where we've gotten 15 pages of attachments in paragraph form, every movement that an employee makes throughout the workday. In painfully minute detail, as such as what I was just talking about. Unlocking the door, or turning on the light switch, walking to my desk, sitting down, turning on my computer. Trust me, we've gotten a lot of those, and it's and since we do go through all of these, it gets very time consuming and a little painful in some instances to do that. That's way too much information. On the flip side, we need enough information to get an impression of what you're doing in your job. So the other example that I use, and this was one example that stuck out, this was years ago. It was a town in the mountains in Southern Virginia. And PAQ came through, and on this blank paper first page, it said shovel, backhoe, truck. That was it. That was it. And so it's like, okay, now we know the equipment that you use, but can you explain to us a little bit about what you're doing with those? And that was an instance where an employee just needed some assistance from somebody else to be able to put down on paper the work that they need. So any supervisors or any other staff where, not everybody is good at, putting their thoughts down on paper. So if you find that there's any staff that need any assistance in putting down on paper the work that they do, supervisors, coworkers, go ahead and offer that assistance to anybody for that. Because again, it's important for us to get thorough, accurate information. So these fields expand, and you'll see that when I show you what a printed copy will look like, where you can see how it is. Also, the number of fields expands. So if all of a sudden you get to, number 7, and you're saying, well, I can't put any more than 7 job duties in here, and I have a few more. Once you type into this field, another field will automatically open for you. So the next piece, before you start to put your information within this questionnaire, when you start to formulate out your ideas, so you've done your homework, start to put these in order of importance. So what do you think is the most important part of your job? Down to the things that, are really not, they're important, but they're not vital to the reason your position exists. So put that one first, and then assign approximate percentage of time. It doesn't need to be exact, just approximately where you're spending your time. The instructions say nothing should be less than 5%. That's kind of a guideline that encourages you to group similar functions together. So put that percentage in. If you make a mistake and you put something else in here, you will say, revise your percentage. Sorry, it doesn't add up to 100%. So this prevents like the types of employees that provide 15 pages of attachments to adding up to 150%. So it will ask you to make that change. So it won't let you move forward unless you're at that 100%. So at this point, you can say, okay, well that took me a while. I'm done with this. You can save to complete later, or you can move to the next page. If you move to the next page and you haven't hit save to complete later, it will save your responses. But that's just a precaution in case something happens, you know, the internet goes out or you have a power outage or things like that. As always, make sure that you're saving your work as you go along, just as a precaution. So the next questions get a lot simpler and easier to answer. They are mostly just clicking on boxes. And all your responses will show up in yellow when you go through this. So the first one of these is going to be, what's the level of education that is required of your position? And again, looking at job requirements, not individual employee qualifications. So for this position, we've clicked high school diploma or GED. If it's a higher level of education, when you click on that box, you'll see that you get a new entry window. And this asks what major or coursework is required. So is there a specific degree requirement or an area of study that's required? And that you can provide that information in here.
And for this, are you asking them to make a judgment about what they would need in order to complete the duties they've just described? Or are you asking them to duplicate what's on the job description that I will provide you all with?
Yes. Whatever best suits the position. I mean, typically what's in the description is what the organization requires. However, if it's a description that might be a little bit older, or maybe the requirements have changed, or you really feel that the description says it requires a high school diploma, but I firmly believe that somebody with an associate's degree would be a better fit for this job, go ahead and put down the associate's degree. And then we will, your supervisor will review, Human Resources review, and we'll kind of make that determination of really what best suits the organization. Because this is looking at, I'll answer your question, just because we're really looking at what best suits the organization. Because sometimes if you put higher level of degrees on positions, it narrows down your recruitment pool. So the number of candidates that you have applying for jobs can then scope, the number of those qualified applicants can narrow if you have a degree requirement that's too high, unless it's something that really is detrimental to the need of the position.
If a job description says this degree or an equivalent level of experience, how do you answer that question?
You put what that degree says, because our descriptions will automatically put in or an equivalent level. Okay? Did everybody hear that question? Okay, if you don't hear it, let me know and I will repeat those questions for you. So I'm going to click back up to high school and then that disappears. And then looking at years of experience that's required. And again, this is something, if the library were going to hire somebody into the position, what's the level of prior work experience that they would require? Not how long you've been in your position or what experience you brought to your position, what would be that minimum requirement. So no experience on up to 6 or more, and then what is the type of experience that is required? So what previous type of work experience, if any, is required? Then the next question, do you need to have any licenses, certifications, registrations, or specialized training? So do you need to have a driver's license? Or are you going to different locations? Then a driver's license would be a requirement. Are there any state certifications or any special requirements? Do you need to be able to speak foreign language? as a part of your position. You know, given, you know, the population within the county for a lot of positions, that would be a benefit, to be bilingual within the organization. So this is where you would put those pieces of information, and then when is it needed? Is it upon hire, within 6 months, within a year, et cetera? And again, this field will expand as well. So if you come up with, you know, 5 of these and you have 6, once you put the last one in, it will give you another open box to complete. And then again, your options down at the bottom, you can move back a page if you so choose, or you can continue on to the next page or save to complete later. So when we get to these next questions and you read the selections, more than one option may apply to different aspects of your position. So just think about the overall responsibility level of your position and select the best fit for your job for this. When we had paper forms, you know, and we used to tell people, just make one selection per question. You don't know how many of these we got back where somebody had checked every single box for every single question. And then we had to kind of guess, okay, what is the best fit based on our knowledge of similar positions in similar organizations. So just read through these and make the best selection. So when we get to level of work, and if you remember, this was one of the factors under the SAFE job evaluation system. And what this is looking for, and all of these questions basically tie back to the essential functions you listed on the first section of this questionnaire. So what is needed in order for you to perform those essential functions in your job? So this is looking at, you know, what is the scope of the work assignments that you perform in your position with the library? What's the level of problem solving that's necessary to perform those job duties? And again, all of your selections will highlight in yellow. Then looking at work complexity, so what's the variety, what's the difficulty, what's the complexity of the work that you perform? What's the level of skill that you need to perform those job duties? What's the level of analytical ability that's required? Then working conditions, this is broken down into 2 different categories. For some of you, neither applies much. For others, it might be one or the other. For some positions, both of these apply. But typically, you know, anytime you're working with the public and with patrons and with clients, you know, typically there is, you know, some level of stress that might be involved. And then also, you know, physical conditions, depending on, you know, where the facility that you work in and the type of work that you do. You know, are you moving, you know, boxes and materials and things around like that around your branch. So the first one is looking at the extent of disagreeable or hazardous environmental or physical conditions that you may face. The second one of these, what's the level of mental effort or what's the level of stress involved in your job? And when we're talking about stress, is what's required of the position, not how well we handle it on any given day. You know, because some days we handle it very, very well. We might have somebody that's difficult in there, and other days something a little bit more difficult comes into play. Like yesterday when we were in OMAC, somebody had to excuse themselves because there was a patron who was slamming the keyboard of the computer on the table and actually broke it. So, you know, sometimes there are situations that occur that, you know, raises that level of stress, and that's not just because you're not handling it well, it's just because that's the level of stress. So what are the situations that may occur within the in your situation? Not just because we're having a bad day and we want to throw a book at somebody, but what is truly required. Don't do that. I just threaten to throw my laptop over the atrium railing sometimes when it's not working. But so those are those types of requirements. Then interpersonal skills, again, responsibility working with and through others, and then what's the frequency and what is the purpose of those contacts, and then just give us a sampling of those that you have contact with in the performance of your job. Then your level of responsibility. So this is looking at the level of supervision that you receive. So how much contact, how much direction do you get from your immediate supervisor? You know, some of you see your supervisor on a daily basis and have regular contact. Others of you, because of where you're assigned, you may not have as regular contact or direction from your supervisor. So what are the types of decisions that you need to be able to make and those types of things? Then impact and consequences. This is looking at those types of decisions that you're required to make and actions that you're required to take, and what's the level of impact and consequences on the organization. Not to you personally. So this is not if you make a mistake, you know, is somebody going to come and, you know, talk to you about it or discipline or something like that. It's what is the impact on the organization. And I know that it's a little hard to read up here, but we can only make them so big. So then for anybody that has supervisory or oversight responsibilities, this is where you can provide us that information. So if you're going through and you click on no, this is all you're going to see on this page. But if you click yes, you're going to get a drop down of several additional questions for you to provide information. So looking at what is your scope of authority. So are you kind of a team lead? So you're providing some work direction, you're maybe assigning some projects, you're doing training of other employees. This would be a work lead. Or if it's volunteers, you know, you have volunteers that run through library systems, and are you responsible for those volunteers and making sure they're utilized in the best manner? So that would be where you would put that team lead.
So yes, we do want everyone to look at that closely. I know not everyone is technically a supervisor, but branch librarians, as an example, are supervising, or not supervising, providing oversight to volunteers and subs and things like that. So please look at that closely. We want to get really accurate information.
Yep, thank you. So then if you do, then list the position or title. So if it's volunteers, you would put in here volunteers and the approximate number. It doesn't need to be exact, but the approximate number, or the position title and how many FTEs there are. And so an FTE equals 40 hours per week. So if you're supervising one employee that works 40 hours per week, that would be one FTE. If you have two employees that each work 20 hours per week, that would still be one FTE. And then what level of supervisory responsibility do you have? So are you recommending certain functions, or are you taking action, or does it not apply? So do you have the ability to hire staff? Or can you recommend hiring of certain levels of staff? You know, for those of you who are lead work, you're directing and inspecting work, and you're providing training for employees. But do you recommend or participate in the evaluation of performance or scheduling of different employees? So this is where you can put that. So again, you have the same options at the bottom, and I'm going to click next page. And this is another example of where you might get a flag for a question. So just read them and then take the appropriate action. So in this instance, it says that I said I had oversight responsibilities, but I didn't list anything else. So I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to go back up here and say, oops, you know, when I read this, I really don't, so I'm going to say no. And then you can proceed to the next page. So the last section of the questionnaire is just to ensure that when we develop these descriptions, they're in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, and let any potential or current employees know what those physical requirements and working conditions are in your job. So the selections in this section are none, up to 1/3, 1/3 to 2/3, or 2/3 or more. This does not need to add up to anything. It's just thinking on average throughout your work year how much time you spend in any of these areas. So do you need to lift or move anything? If so, how much does it weigh? And you can have several selections in this category. Then, you know, how much physical activity, standing, walking, sitting, reaching, stooping, those types of things. Then visual requirements, so is it standard vision, or do you need to have any special vision requirements? So in this instance, we've done close, color, peripheral, so what are the visual requirements? Vocal communication requirements, so do you need to speak and at what level? Hearing, and then sensory utilization. Then when we get to kind of the last page of questions, do you have any environmental conditions? Right now this says no, so that's all you see. If you click yes, you'll get another drop down of a series of questions, so you can click on yes just to see if any of these apply to your position. So this is looking at conditions such as, are you required to work outdoors at any time? Are you exposed to fumes or chemicals? Vibration, I'm hoping nobody in a library system has to work with explosives. But if you do, I'm hoping not. This is where you would put that, and then there's a space for anything that we haven't covered. So if none of those apply, just go ahead and click no, and that will disappear. And then just typical noise level in your work environment. And I know this says quiet is library, but that's not quite the way it used to be. Libraries aren't necessarily the quiet environment where they shh, as they used to be. So just click whatever you feel is appropriate. All right, this is where we get to the last page. And this is where you can go to previous page, you can save to complete later, or you can hit submit. My recommendation is once you do the first go through of this, do not hit submit upon your first go through with this, because once you hit submit, it's gone. You will not have access to any of your responses. You won't have the ability to print or review any of the information. So make sure you do this at least twice, if not more, until you and the other employees that may be participating with you are comfortable with all of your responses. So when you get to this point, again, I would say click Save to Complete Later. And then if you want to do a review, you can go to this main menu, and it will show you the surveys that are yet to be completed. For supervisors that have responsibility for reviewing questionnaires, all of the positions that you have responsibility for reviewing will show up on this, so you can start to click through those. So this shows you the title, the name of the person, job title, the email of the person that's designated to complete this, and then it also gives you the ability to view. So you can click on this view button, and it shows you all of your responses in here, and it shows you the full field. So when you're typing in the essential functions on that online PAQ, it won't show you the entire content as you're moving through that, but when you go through here, it shows you the entire content of the field. It will expand, and as you can see, there's several blanks, so you have the opportunity to really provide us information. So you can use this, you can save it, so that you can share it with other employees in your classification if there's multiples and you're doing this on their behalf, or you can save it and print a copy for your own records before you hit submit. And we always encourage people to keep a copy for your own records. So when the proposed classification description comes through and you're reading it, you can go, well, that was 5 months ago and I don't remember what I said. You have a copy that you can refer to for that. Okay? Any questions on this before I jump in and show you what the supervisor will review? Okay, you're a quiet group. All right, get out of this one, and then we're going to jump into, any supervisors in this room, this is the email that you will receive when employees under your supervision have completed a PAQ. And again, it will give you the link for logon, and each supervisor will have their own unique user ID and password for this. And this is the information that when you get the information from Brianna, who you're going to share this with, this is the information they will need to do a review, or depending on how they want to review, they may want you to provide, a printed out copy, and then they'll provide input on that and then go back to you as well. So again, just click on the link. And so this is showing where it was last reviewed on. So when somebody enters as you're going through the process, when you reopen the survey, it will go back to the last page that you were working on when you opened it. So this is where then you can say, okay, I need to go back to the beginning or go to a different section. So we're going to click Begin Survey. And so this will show the employee and the position that this PAQ was completed for. And this is where the supervisor can see all of the employee responses and provide information. So in this document, there will be areas where the supervisor can click within the same box what their response is, and then they're going to be read-only sections where the supervisor will provide comments in a different area. So for hours of work, supervisor can either agree or put a different level for this. And in this example, we're going to click this, and then the supervisor can comment that the position is budgeted for 37.5 hours, even though the employee has put 40. And then you can see employee responses are always outlined in blue, and then the supervisor responses will show up in yellow. It shows what the employee put in for essential functions, and you can see I can click in this as much as I want, and I can't get into those areas. So down below, this is where the supervisor can provide any comments. So if there's an essential job duty that the employee has missed, because it's hard to think about all the work that you do, this is where a supervisor can add that additional function, or they can clarify any functions that an employee has included, or provide any additional input. So for example purposes, I have this, the employee has put in that they supervise staff. And what the supervisor's comments are is the employee does not supervise staff, they provide training to new hires. So kind of clarifying what that employee's level of responsibility is. And so again, all the options are the same, save or next page. And I'm not going to go through this whole document, I'm just going to kind of show you what happens here. So again, the employee responses show up in blue. Supervisor can't make any changes. The supervisor can provide comment at the bottom, and a supervisor can either leave this blank or say they agree or provide additional information. And then when we get to this section, again, employee comments in blue, and this is where the supervisor can go through and highlight for each question. As a part of this process, what we're encouraging supervisors to do is if they are providing any comments or any additional information, to schedule a time to discuss with the employee or employees in the position what additional comments they've made, where they may have chosen a different selection for any questions, so that they can have a discussion about what's included in that PAQ. Sometimes with these types of projects, it can be a big education for both the employee and the supervisors, and for department heads and for human resources as well. Because what is identified in a job description may not be relevant to a particular employee. Or, an employee, because of the needs of the branch that you're working in, you've kind of assumed some additional duties. So it's kind of an educational process, an informative process, so they know exactly, what's going on, what's the work that's being done, and who's doing it. So we're encouraging that level of communication because it makes for, a more consistent and valid process as we go through that. So I'm not going to spend any more time on this PAQ. I think everybody sees how it works and that your supervisor can't change your responses. So with that, I'm going to pause and see if there are any questions, comments, concerns. Now's your chance, and if you have a question, somebody else may have the same one as well.
That's a really good job.
Thank you.
So, I have a question.
Yes.
So every employee is going to be sent a PAQ online, but if you want them to collaborate,
Encourage collaboration and provide the time and the space for them to collaborate as well. Yes.
I have a question about the FTE. So, I am
Brianna, will you take her the microphone, please? Sorry, I'm making the pregnant lady move.
So my question is that I am a 40-hour-week employee, and we have another librarian who's a 32-hour-week librarian. And she's considered, is she considered full-time? No. So I wouldn't count, but if we have library subs who have regular hours, would we count that if they add up together to 40 hours? Like, so I have my colleague, and then I have a library assistant, or 2 library assistants who add up to 40 hours. Would that count?
Yeah, just put 40 hours. We'll know the details of individual employees when we have employee census information. So if there is an employee in the position that is working 40 hours, just put the 40 hours, but then put down in comments that the hours of work vary dependent on the individual employee. So they can work for anywhere from 0 to 40 hours. And we're aware of that as well. We know that there are substitutes, there's part-time employees in every position. It's just that if every employee is working less than full-time, we can give that. And if there's full-time employees in a position and there's part-time in the same position, if they're doing different work, I would encourage separate PAQs to be completed.
That answer your question? Or are you wanting to know how to calculate when you have a regularly scheduled sub? I would count those hours toward the full-time equivalent and then count. Yeah, exactly. So, yes.
Any other questions? I know it's getting close to lunchtime, so. All right, well, if nothing else, if you think of anything else, again, there was my contact information, or you can contact Brianna. If she can't answer the question, she'll make sure that I can. Well, thank you, everybody, for coming. Thanks for participating in the process.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone, for coming today and for taking the time that this project is going to take. We really appreciate it.
And that PowerPoint presentation, since it was kind of messed up at the beginning, if anybody wants to look at it, Human Resources does have a copy.